Hello, YouTube, and welcome to the April 19th edition of the Weekly Touchdown. I just recorded this whole thing, or thought I did, and I had hit the wrong button, so we're going to do it for a second time. But why I told you that, I don't know. I just felt kind of frustrated with it. But anyway, today we're going to talk about the AFC North and South as we prepare for the draft coming up on April 27th. First thing I want to say is welcome. I hope you enjoy this. If you have any questions, folks, feel free to ask me. I'll be trying to answer anything that I can, providing as much information I can. I'll tell you, I'm just a football fan, American football fan, and I'm going to share my interpretation, my assessment of this stuff. A lot of people make a lot of money doing this. I'm not one of them. I just do it for fun. So we're going to start with the AFC North. Look at the four teams there. I'm going to talk about the number of draft picks they have, what they're going to be picking in the first round, and what their major needs are. And then on Sunday, we'll sit down and take a look at the mock draft and see who I think is going to go where in that first round. We'll start out with the Cleveland Browns. They have 11 picks in the first in this draft. They're going to be picking first and 12th. The record was 1-15 last year. The way the NFL draft works, if you don't know, it goes in reverse order. So the team with the worst record picks first, the team that wins the Super Bowl picks 32nd, and everybody else is spread out. If you have teams that end up with the exact same record, they go with their home wins against common opponents. There's all kinds of factors that come into it to determine what that is. So the Browns, though, one win last year out of 16 games. Their top needs are quarterback, pass rusher, and defensive back. Quarterback, I'm still not sold on. I'll be honest with you. I think the offensive line got some stability with some free agent signings. I'm not sold on them taking that grasp for a quarterback, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in the draft that I'm going to do. I will say pass rusher, they're going to take care of that, I'm pretty sure, with the first pick. Myles Garrett, defensive end out of Texas A&M. He's pretty much the consensus number one draft pick. The reason they have two picks in the first round is they actually traded the number two pick last year to Philadelphia so that they could select quarterback Carson Wentz, and that gave them Philadelphia's pick in this draft. That's the number 12 pick. They also have multiple picks in the fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh round, so they're going to be able to stock up. A lot of talk about whether or not they can package these things up and move up to get some more players, quality players. We're going to see. This is going to be an interesting draft for the Browns. Secondly is the Cincinnati Bengals. They also have 11 picks. They have the Browns and the Bengals have the most picks in this draft. They are picking ninth. They had a record last year of 6-9-1. Their top needs are offensive lineman, linebacker, and a edge rusher, which would be a defensive end or an outside linebacker. They lost two of their starting offensive linemen, Andrew Whitworth, who went to the Rams, and Kevin Zeitler, who went to the Browns. So they're going to be looking for some more depth along the offensive line. They also need more athletic linebackers. And this can be outside linebacker, inside linebacker. Outside linebacker can be your edge rusher. Inside linebacker, you're looking at covering the middle of the field. Tight ends, wide receivers in those short crossing routes across the middle. The curl routes that end up setting up right behind the offensive line, defensive line. You need a linebacker that can cover those tight ends and wide receivers. So we're going to be looking at those kind of things for the Bengals. The Baltimore Ravens have 7 picks. They're going to be picking 16th. They had a record of 8-8. Their top needs are outside linebacker, wide receiver, and cornerback. They need to find somebody that can rush from the outside. They've lost a lot of guys in free agency. Age is catching up to them. So they need an outside linebacker that can cover the flats, that can also come in and be an edge rusher for them. So that's going to be an issue. They need some help at wide receiver. Steve Smith retired at the end of the year. He had been injured, so he lost a step. So they need somebody to come in. They need some of the young guys they have to kind of step up. They lost Torrey Smith. They lost they're pretty much their whole wide receiver core and their defensive backs. They need some help there. So we're going to see where they kind of target with this draft. Pittsburgh Steelers have 8 picks. They're picking 30th because they lost to the Patriots in the AFC Championship game. Their top needs, what they're going to be looking for is outside linebacker, inside linebacker, and wide receiver. James Harrison just re-signed another contract. He's in his mid to late 30s. He's still out there knocking heads off, but age is going to catch up to him pretty soon, so they're going to have to deal with that issue. Lawrence Timmons is gone, so they've got to fill in his spot in inside linebacker. Antonio Brown, a lot of people may wonder why is wide receiver an issue for the Steelers when they have Antonio Brown. The problem is you've got at least four defensive backs. You got one receiver, Antonio Brown over here. You double cover him because you don't have quality on the other side. It makes life harder on Antonio Brown. So you need to have somebody that can stretch the field, that can be a threat on that other side to make them pull, because I've seen even teams last year that would triple cover Antonio Brown. He still had his receptions, but you've got to have somebody that pull that off and make it a little bit easier for him to do what he's getting paid to do. So that's going to have to be an issue. They need a good slot receiver. They need a good number 2 receiver. Antonio Brown's number 1 receiver. That's locked up. But number 2 slot receiver, they need to address those issues. So that's the AFC North. The AFC South is the other one we're going to look at today. And the 4 teams in the South are the Jacksonville Jaguars, the Tennessee Titans, Indianapolis Colts, and the Houston Texans. The Jaguars have 8 picks. They're going to be picking 4th. They had a record of 3-13. Their top needs are going to be tight end, defensive tackle, and offensive line. They did have Julius Thomas as a tight end. He had played 4 years in Denver, signed as a free agent with the Jaguars, played 2 years down there. His production fell off. Is it because of him? Is it because of the quarterback situation in Jacksonville? I don't know. But he was traded to Miami, so they now have a need for tight end. I don't think that's going to be a problem for them to address because this is a pretty rich, deep tight end class for a draft. They also have an opening in defensive tackle, so there's going to be a need there. Offensive line, they've got some stopgaps. They need to address those kind of issues. I tell you, and I say this quite a bit, and I'm going to say it again when it comes to Jacksonville. Your playmakers can't be playmakers if they don't have time to do it. So if your offensive line is mediocre to weak, it's going to impact the whole influence the whole game in a negative way. You've got to make sure you've got that depth and quality on offensive line. I think you deal with those issues, it can make a good quarterback look great. It can make a good running back look great because they've got time to do what they can do. A lot of names, the pundits are talking about them drafting a running back with this pick, and I'll talk about that when we get to the draft special, but I think that is a strong possibility. The Tennessee Titans are going to be picking 5th and 18th. They have 8 picks. The reason they have those 2 picks is they traded the number 1 pick last year to the Rams, which gives them the number 5 pick, and then the number 18 pick is actually theirs. They do not have a second-round pick, though, because they traded that to the Browns last year to move up to take offensive tackle Jake Conklin. They have a total of 8 picks. Their record was 9-17. They have top needs of cornerback, wide receiver, and inside linebacker. They just let Jason McCourty, their number 1 cornerback, go. So they're going to have a big issue that they've got to deal with there. They need really 2 starting cornerbacks. A lot of pundits say that they're going to address that with that number 5 pick. They also need a true number 1 wide receiver. That's been an issue for the Titans over the last few years, so they're going to probably be addressing that with the number 18 pick. They also need to get a inside linebacker that's a little bit more athletic, that can help cover those third down plays, runs up the middle, those counters where you're running those, once again, those short crossing routes in the middle of the field. So we're going to talk about a little bit more what the Titans' plans are going to be with those number 5 and 18 picks, but I think they're going to address especially that cornerback and wide receiver needs in those first 2 picks. The Indianapolis Colts have 7 picks. They're going to be picking 15th. They ended up with a record of 8-8. Their top needs are offensive lineman, defensive lineman, and running back. Everything that I've been reading about the Colts say the same thing. They've got major issues on both sides of the ball. I think it was really nice of the pundits when I looked at this to see that there were only 3 things I identified as a need. I think there's a lot more. I think the number 1 need for the Colts, and this is a recurring theme you're going to hear, folks, is offensive line. Andrew Luck is a great quarterback, but he's got the crap beaten out of him the last few years. He ended up last season injured most of the time. If you do not have an offensive lineman that gives your quarterback time to do anything, it doesn't matter how good they are. You've got to be able to protect your quarterback. You've got to be able to make holes for the running back. Running back is an issue for them. Their defensive line is an issue for them. But you are not going to be able to score points if your quarterback is getting slammed to the ground every time he touches the ball. You're not going to score points if your running back is getting hit at the line of scrimmage or behind the line of scrimmage. And that all comes from your offensive line. They have to address that issue with the offensive line moving forward with this team. I think you're going to see that happen with that number 15 pick. Defensive lineman, once again, the battle is in the trench, and the GM of the Panthers calls them the big hog mollies, the fights in the trenches. You've got to be able to control that line of scrimmage. They also need a running back. They've been trying to sign has-beens and also-rans, and they need to get a quality running back. I think they're going to address that issue on Saturday in rounds 4 through 7. This is a pretty deep running back class, so I think that's where we're going to see that kind of addressed. Last team that I want to talk about in the AFC South is the Houston Texans. They have 7 picks. They're going to be picking 25th. They have a record of 9-7. Their top needs are quarterback, offensive lineman, and linebacker. For the last few years, when you talk about the Texans, the first thing that comes out is they need a quarterback. They need a quarterback. And I'm really kind of torn with what they're doing here. They signed Brian Hoyer a few years ago. Brian was not a bad quarterback, but the offensive line did not do a good job protecting him, so he was cut. He's now become kind of a journeyman bouncing around from team to team. They thought they had dealt with the issue last year. They brought in Brock Osweiler from Denver as a free agent, gave him a big fat contract, and where's he at right now? He's sitting in Cleveland as part of a trade deal where the Texans gave up their second-round pick for a sixth-round pick to get rid of Osweiler and his $18 million contract. So now they're still looking for a quarterback. Their other need is offensive line and linebacker. They don't have a right guard and right tackle. And if you've heard any of my other podcasts, I'll talk about the left tackle as the most important position on an offensive line with a right-handed quarterback because he protects the back of the quarterback when he's in the pocket to throw the ball. But the right-hand side, you got to have somebody there that's not a swinging door. Your right guard, right tackle have to be able to give the quarterback the time to look across the field and make the throw. You can't do that with somebody in your face. So is it the quarterback's fault, or is it the fact that they are struggling to find a good combination at right guard and right tackle? My humble opinion, based on 40-some years of watching the NFL, address those offensive line needs, folks. Get you a right guard, get you a right tackle. The quarterback position will work itself out. You draft somebody in there, but if you bring somebody in without addressing that right guard, right tackle position, they're not going to be able to do well because they're going to get the crap beat out of them. I mean, that's just the reality of it. Watch the film, you see that kind of stuff. They also need to find them an inside linebacker that, once again, is going to be able to help them with those third down situations, covering those tight ends, covering those slot receivers, coming across the middle on those short yardage plays. You've got to have inside linebackers that can cover those guys now. And we're not talking about the tight ends of years ago that all they did was block. We're talking about guys like Rob Gronkowski that can catch the ball and run with it after the catch. And if you don't have an athletic linebacker that can cover those guys, they're going to chew you up all day long with that. And we saw that happen in the playoffs last year. They do not have, as I said, they do not have their second-round draft pick because they gave it to the Browns as part of that trade to offload Brock Osweiler. Those are the 8 teams in the AFC North and South. Folks, if you have questions, throw them down in the comments. I'll be happy to try to answer them for you. Throw them at me on Twitter. I'll be happy to try to answer them in any way I can. If I can't find the answer, I'll keep looking until we do. I'll direct you somewhere to somebody that can. I hope you like what I'm doing with this. If you do, hit a like down there. If you know somebody that's interested in the NFL, might get something out of this, go ahead and direct them to these things. I love talking about this stuff if you haven't noticed. If you have not done so, go ahead and subscribe to my channel. And one of these days, I'm actually going to learn how to talk so I don't stumble over all these words. Either way it goes, though, folks, I hope you have a great day, and I'll talk to you later.